Good afternoon, and welcome to Expose Yourself to Art, a show that explores the creative process by inviting artists to join us in a chat about their work and their art. My name is David Schrader, and I'm going solo today. My usual partner, Linda Scheller, is off doing one of her wonderful creative, poetic uh, programs. So, anyway, she'll join us next week, but we'll get by without her today. And our wonderful guest today is Ryan Foy. And this is what he has to say. Originally from Denver, Colorado, Ryan attended the University of Michigan Musical Theater program and studied at the National Institute of Dramatic Arts in Sydney, Australia. While based in New York City, Ryan appeared on stage in numerous national and international tours and regional productions across America, Australia, and Asia, including performances at Radio City Music Hall and the New York International Fringe Festival. A skilled director, Ryan has also helmed a wide variety of musical theater productions from coast to coast. Ryan's theatrical experience extends beyond the stage with work in company management, Broadway marketing, advertising, and theatrical design and production. I can also add that Ryan is a new member to the Stanislaus County Arts Council. And he's also intimately involved with the newly developing Children's Museum in town. So he has a lot of things to share with us today. So come on in, Ryan, and yeah, if I can find the clicker here to get you on, welcome.
Hi there. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah. Wow, that's quite a resume. All around the world. My gosh.
Yep. And that's only part of it. That's just the theater part of it. So we got lots of other stuff going on too.
What a wonderful life. Or at least it sounds like it would be.
No, it's been a lot of fun. I've been able to see almost all 50 states and lots of the world. So it's been an exciting life for sure.
Yeah. So by way of starting, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? You had this little tidbit before we went on the air. You told me that you're one of the Foys, the famous Foy.
So the theater industry is in my blood, so to speak. So if you're familiar with Eddie Foy and the Seven Little Foys, which was a very famous vaudeville performer and family, Eddie Foy is my great grandfather. And so back in the early 1900s, he was one of the biggest vaudeville stars and performed on Broadway and toured the world on the vaudeville circuit. And as time went on in the early 1900s, he with his third wife, he had 7 children, and he took them on the road with him as a performing act called Eddie Foy and the Seven Little Foys. And so the 7th littlest Foy was Irving Foy, and he's my grandfather. And if you're not familiar, there's a great film that was made about my family in the 50s. Bob Hope played Eddie Foy. It's a wonderful film. TCM Classic Movies plays it pretty much every Christmas, so you can still catch it if you have that channel. And one of the best tap dance routines in Hollywood history is in that movie, with Bob Hope playing Eddie Foy at the Friars Club opposite James Cagney playing George M. Cohan, and they do a huge tap routine on top of the tables there. It's really fun.
Wow.
So yeah, that's my family history. It's pretty exciting.
Quite a history.
I had the bug because my family was always telling stories and pushed me into the limelight, so to speak.
Yeah. What about your parents? Were they involved in the arts in any way?
Not too much. No, actually, they were both mortgage bankers, actually. So they never did it too much. But they always supported us. My sister and I were both really into the arts growing up, and they supported us a lot while we did it. So,
yeah. So you majored in it in college, I see.
So I grew up in Denver, like I said, and had a great performing arts department at my high school there, and it was almost a sort of beeline straight to a few big programs in the country for theater and musical theater. So I ended up going to University of Michigan for musical theater performance. it was kind of a toss up between that and going to New York to NYU to pursue directing at Tisch. And I ended up going the Michigan path, which was awesome. And if anyone's familiar with the Michigan Musical Theater Department, it is a powerhouse. They call it the Michigan Mafia, which is still the number of alumni from that program who are Tony winners and big parts of the theater industry today is incredible. Like the biggest example is actually they were in my class with me that I studied with them. My year was Benj Pasek and Justin Paul, who are the composers who most recently did the Lyle Lyle Crocodile movie, but also did the music for La La Land, which they won an Oscar for, and The Greatest Showman, and also wrote the music for Dear Evan Hansen, which they won the Tony for. So they're one statue away from being EGOT winners, and I'm proud to say they were my classmates in college. So it's fun.
Happy to claim them. Yes.
Yes, exactly. I'll always claim them.
So, but then there's this jump to Sydney.
Yeah, that was actually a study abroad term. I was lucky enough. The program at Michigan was always encouraged students during their junior year to study abroad for a term, for a semester. And, a lot of students would end up going to RADA, the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts in London, or that was usually where people went. And I had the penchant to be different. So I was like, I'm going to go the other direction. So I was actually the first student, myself and one other student from the theater department. We were the first ones to go to NIDA from Michigan. So we sort of led the charge there, which was
okay.
So while all my classmates were shivering either in Michigan or London, my friend and I were living it up on the beach in Sydney.
Jeez. Jealousy. On my part. So then back to New York.
Yeah. And then, so after college, I moved to New York and I spent about 8 years there. And during that time, I would say about half of that was spent on the road. I booked a lot of jobs that were national and international tours. So I would be gone out of the city for 6 to 8 months at a time on a job and then come back and start over every time the show would close.
Yeah. What was that like? I mean, I've heard stories from other people that I know who have, tried that lifestyle.
Yeah, it's both incredibly challenging and really fun. You have to. There's certain tricks to it, and different tours are. Each tour is its own animal. Like one job that I did not take when I got it was I had booked the national tour of Annie to go play Rooster, but that tour. It was at such a time that tour was only doing one-nighters, and I would have one seat on a bus and every night would have to drive to a new city. And then they wanted me to sign like a 14-month contract with no out. And I was like, I'm going to pass on that one. But every show I did was different. I was on one show where there were only, I think 8 of us in the cast, and we had one of those like rock star tour buses. So we had like a bus with like a living room and a kitchen, and then we each had a bunk, and then in the back bedroom was where the company manager lived. And then I've also done ones where we traveled on a traditional store bus, like where you just have a row of seats to yourself. And I even been on a tour where we play week or 2 week long sit downs where you fly everywhere. So it really just depends on the job. And it's always an adventure.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And then you go on tour, and then what? Back to New York.
Back to New York, and then back to the auditions, back to the circuit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't miss that part of the life.
No, I've heard a lot of stories, from other performers who have had that lifestyle. Yeah.
And I was lucky enough to meet my wife on one of those shows. So we were on a show together, and we met, and then sort of moved in together and got married. And she's actually from here. That's how I ended up in Modesto. So she's from Modesto, moved to New York, and brought me back.
All right. So tell me a little bit about her and her.
Yes, she's been very involved in the performing arts industry here in Modesto too. Her name's Chelsea Foy, but her maiden name was Chelsea Costa. So growing up, she was involved in MPA and theater, and and she actually took over the choir program at Downey High School from Polly Vache. She student taught under her and then took over the program and taught there for 3 years, and then left that job to pursue a performing career in New York. So she moved to New York, and we were there together for about 6 years, and then moved to LA for a couple of years. And then when we started to have a family and raise some kids, we decided to move back here to be closer to her family and have a community to call our own,
Right, right. And so in that time period, there's a transition for you, from performing to what you're doing now, I should say. Yeah.
Yeah. So between shows in New York, when you didn't have a job, so to speak, you had to find other ways to make money. So it was always the hustle of whether it was working as a cater waiter, serving at parties, which was always fun to be the cater waiter at the opening night for Broadway shows and like hide your face, or working in marketing. Like I had some marketing gigs where you would like go do promotional or guerrilla marketing out on the street and like, do stuff in Times Square, handing out pamphlets or like going on tour for promo materials, that sort of stuff. And then I actually got into more of the Broadway digital marketing space. So I did an internship for a while with AKA York, which is one of the big Broadway advertising firms. So I spent about 6 months learning the ropes on how all the advertising works on Broadway shows and building out their websites and stuff like that. So it was just whatever jobs came along. And then actually I really got into the arts administration side of things when my wife Chelsea booked a show, and I was trying to book a job on the same show and didn't actually end up getting cast, but I knew the creative team. And so I talked myself into an assistant company manager position on the tour. So I got to go out on the road with her and work backstage on the show, which was really awesome. Yeah. And then during all that time too, I actually started my own business as a web designer. So I was always working on the side as a graphic and web designer, and mostly building websites for the creative industry, for artists and musical theater performers and directors and that sort of thing. And I still have that business. I've got a business partner who is actually one of my roommates from college and roommates in New York, who's also a performer. So he still lives in New York and is still a Broadway actor. He still is auditioning and doing shows out there, but we still have our web design business, and we've probably had over like 400 clients in the past 15 years. And I'll show some examples of our work in a little bit later. So
we'll get to that. Yeah. Just curious, has this transition, how does it feel? Does it feel right for you? Do you ever get the bug to go back and perform?
I still do like performing, and I want to go back to performing someday, but there's a certain amount of, I definitely got a little burnt out on the performing side of things, of trying to always always trying to book the next job. Sure. So it's definitely a lot nicer to have that stability of a job and always knowing where your next paycheck is coming from, and to just being able to create in different ways has always enticed me. Like being a director and being a producer has always been more fun to me than being a performer, because you have more sort of control over what type of work you're doing. Often as a performer, you're at the will and behest of the director and the written word, and you are getting to create the character, but there are certain parameters around that you always have to be constrained to. Whereas when you're able to make theater or make art, digital art, websites or anything, you have the freedom to start from an idea and take it wherever it takes you. So as an artist, that's always been more exciting to me,
Good. Okay. And has that changed your view toward performers?
Not at all. No. There, I never had the it factor of performing. There were certain classmates of mine at Michigan who, like, you would watch them work in class and you'd be like, oh, they're going to be on Broadway next year. Right. And I never felt that about myself. And so maybe that was a self-fulfilling prophecy that I never got on Broadway. But I don't pretend to be a performer who could walk into a Broadway audition and book the job. So I know that about myself.
Okay, well, that's about yourself. What about the other ones? When you talk about directing, I've also heard a lot of stories about as you become a director, producer, a creative on that end, you start to look at other actors differently. That's as opposed to when you're being one. You know.
Yes, yeah, you tend to, working with performers is always a challenge because everyone comes with the uh, filled in baggage of being a human behind the character, and so every performer is different. There were, and having worked on a bunch of shows, everybody's different, and some people require different work and different needs. So it's
Yes.
always an adventure. That's the
So
magic, right? It's taking all different elements and putting them into one pot and making a show, right?
Right. Yeah, it takes me back to when I spent a few years doing directing and having to deal with the personalities of many of these actors, and spent so much time doing that. I thought, maybe I'll just go back and be an actor and sit in the corner. This is tough work. I mean, I'm a therapist, and it's like, no, I don't want to be a therapist here. I just want to have fun. Yeah.
Directing is definitely therapy in another world.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's move on. You brought a bunch of very interesting material, and
I did. So yeah, I'll dive in.
well,
we didn't even mention my new position at the Gallo Center.
First of all, your present job.
Yeah. So I just started 3 months ago as the new director of produced theater and special programming at the Gallo Center for the Arts here in Modesto, which is really exciting and is a brand new position. And so it's just a really exciting commitment by the Gallo Center to produced theater and producing their own work. So a major chunk of that role is taking over the artistic leadership of the Gallo Center Repertory Company from Jim Johnson, who's been artistic directing that company for the past 10 years. So moving forward from this season, I'll be artistic directing that and producing 4 shows a year. And I'll bring that up in a second. And then the sort of second half of that title of special programming basically encompasses anything else that the Gallo Center produces in-house. So specifically, like they used to do the Valley Talent Project talent show, or any concert series that we are bringing in local artists to make our own shows. Or the best example right now is the Brown Bag concert series that takes place in the Rotary Music Garden out in front of the Gallo Center every summer. So I'll be programming that season every summer moving forward now. So yeah, so that's the current gig.
Yeah.
So yeah, let me share my screen. I'll talk a little bit more about what
Take a look at
some. Yeah. Here we go. Yeah. So, can you see my screen?
Let me put it up here for us. Here we go. There it is. There we go.
So yeah, if you haven't been to the Gallo Center or the Gallo Center website, please come see a show with us. So this is the page on the Gallo Center that focuses on the Gallo Center Repertory Company. And we've got, in our current season, which these are the shows that Jim Johnson is still producing and artistic directing, we just closed To Kill a Mockingbird earlier this month, which was a beautiful production, which if you're not familiar, so when GCRC launched, it sort of unofficially 10 years ago, it was with a production of To Kill a Mockingbird that was done in partnership with Prospect Theater Project. And Jack Souza played Atticus Finch, and John III played Tom Robinson, who he actually came back and played Tom Robinson again in our recent production last month. But that production sort of kicked off the creation of this theater company. And so Jim chose to remount it this year as to honor his retirement and honor the 10-year anniversary of that show. And it was a wonderful production. So if anyone saw it, it was great. So yeah, and the rest of the season coming up, we've got just in December, we have the play version of the classic movie A Christmas Story, which is starting rehearsal on Tuesday evening, actually. It's very exciting. And then in the spring, we have a production of John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men, which will be directed by Michael Lynch, a great theater artist who just retired from MJC. And then later on in the spring, in May, we have an original work actually called The Twisted Tales of Edgar Allan Poe, which will be co-created and directed by Corey Strauss and Jewel Whitaker. So that's the season coming up, which we're really excited about.
So this, Edgar Allan Poe, I believe Opera Modesto is doing something, could be next summer.
Yeah, no, it's actually in January. So it's an exciting time for Poe fans right now in Modesto. So yeah, Opera Modesto is doing, they're calling it PoeCon, which will be a special convention all around Edgar Allan Poe in January at the State Theater, sort of in collaboration with the Stanislaus County Library. And they're doing it along with, they're doing a production of Annabelle and the Telltale Heart at the State. And then we're sort of piggybacking on that marketing to have a show a few months later. So it'll be a good spring for Edgar Allan Poe fans coming up.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Right.
But yeah, the Rep Company, like I said, it's been around about 10 years. It kind of officially formed in 2016 after doing a number of partnerships with Prospect and MJC and CSU Stanislaus and Sankofa Theater Company, which you had Cheryl on a couple weeks ago, I think, from Sankofa. But just to take a brief look, like if you're not familiar with these shows, everyone should come support Gallo Center Repertory Company because it's really Modesto's largest like straight play producing theater company. Prospect makes wonderful work, but they have a very small house and it's very much a black box theater space. Whereas the shows that Gallo Center Repertory is able to put on is shows in the Foster Theater at the Gallo Center. So seats 440 people. And we need to fill those seats. So please come join us. So if you look at our website, you can see our full past history of plays. This was last year's shows on Golden Pond, Holes, All Is Palm, and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. And traditionally, it's been a lot of theater built around classic literature. So you see Little Women, you see Raisin in the Sun, Stand and Deliver, Rumors, The Miracle Worker, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, The Diary of Anne Frank, Our Town. So it's had a wonderful history, and I'm really excited to sort of continue that moving forward and program some wonderful theater for Modesto and the Central Valley to come see that's locally produced. Yeah. And the key about the Gallo Center Repertory Company is it is a local community theater. So what that means is our actors are all volunteer community members. So actors from our sphere, either living in Modesto or throughout the Central Valley, working with our also local professional theater artists. So we have directors and creative teams working locally who are putting on wonderful theater.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good idea. I was just wondering where this idea came from. Since, as you say, we have Prospect Theater here, we have, the theater companies in the colleges. And
yeah, it really came from, it was Lynn Dickerson was CEO at the time when they did their first show. And I really think it was Jim Johnson's idea to start with. He was working also at the Gallo Center as sort of like their arts ed coordinator very early on as like the beginnings of that program. And he and Jack and Lynn got together and they decided to start by producing that first show. And, it was such a success. They saw the model could work to do theater in that way here locally. And it sort of grew from there. And it's been 10 years of making theater. And now we are, with the creation of my position, it's really a commitment to keep doing that and grow the infrastructure to be able to keep producing great theater.
Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah. So
it just expands the possibilities in the town.
Exactly. Because it's actually really rare for, the Gallo Center is a presenting house more than anything else. So it is normally a large venue that produces and brings in artists from around the world and around the country and presents them for one or two performances. So we get, like last night, Air Supply was playing and soon we have Jay Leno coming and really big name acts coming in and just coming to town and presenting. And it's really rare for a presenting house like that to also produce theater in-house. I've been trying to connect with the other ones in the country that do, and there's really truly only a handful of companies that do that. It's ironically, the Lesher Center in Walnut Creek is one of them. They have their own presenting house that also produces in-house. There's also the Midland Theater Center in Midland, Michigan, which has 2 venues very similar in size to ours. And then another one is the McCarter Theater in Princeton, New Jersey, right on that university campus. They both present and produce in-house. So really, it's not that many. So it's really rare and really exciting that the Gallo is doing it, because it's not done very often.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to see. So
yeah.
Okay, let's. What else do you have? What's up next?
Yeah. I will do a shout out about that brown bag series I mentioned, because I'm hoping to expand that programming. If anyone hasn't heard of it yet, we do summer concerts out in front of the Gallo Center on the Rotary Music Garden that was installed during the pandemic. So you can see a picture of it here, which is a lovely little, like, almost music playground for kids and adults who can come up and play the musical instruments that are there. There's a number of seated drum sets, there's percussion instruments, xylophones, and actually at least once a month we have Dave Rogers come out and do a Drum Love drum circle in the space. So keep an eye out for that calendar so you can come play some drums with Dave Rogers out there. But in the summertime, we work with, this past summer, it was sponsored by Red Ink Architects, and we were able to use the money they sponsored the program to be able to pay our artists to come out and perform. It's Fridays at noon during the summer months, and they put on a great concert, and you can come eat your lunch on the grass and have a nice picnic and listen to good music. So I'll be excited to program my own season of artists to play next summer.
So you mentioned that the bands are paid, the groups are paid to do this?
Yeah, through that sponsorship, we're able to pay a fee for that performance, which is a nice, I think it's really important to pay artists for the work that they do. So it's really great to be able to have that underwritten. So we're able to, I look at this space especially, and the Gallo Center does too, as a way to give back to the community. And so putting on these free public performances is one of those ways, and also looking for ways to expand that programming so that there's lots of ways for people to just gain access to the arts for free, and also hopefully that they get exposed to the Gallo Center in general, and then hopefully come inside and become a patron as well. So, I'm currently programming additional ways to use this space. For example, actually just this Friday night, we had 2 big shows in the Gallo. It was the Central West Ballet's production of Frankenstein, and in the main Rogers Theater was Mariachi Los Camperos, a really great mariachi group. And so I programmed another local mariachi band, Mariachi La Union, to come play for an hour pre-show. So while guests were arriving for the other 2 shows, they were able to come listen to other music outside as they were walking in. And then inside we have a big Dia de los Muertos ofrende on display in the lobby. So it was a great weekend of programming. And we at the Gallo Center that's what we're aiming to do, is really just be able to expand, get the art out there to as many people as possible.
Good. No, it's good. I'm serious. It's good to hear, that you're expanding out into the community and finding ways to relate to, the rest of us.
And additionally, like other ways to use this space, I've got a program coming up in the spring. I'm partnering with the public library. They do story time downstairs in the library for kids. They do Wiggle Worms and story time. And so once a month coming this spring, we'll be hosting one of those story times here in the music garden. So we'll be able to sort of bring some kids down, let them play the musical instruments, hear a couple books, and do some activities, and then run around on the grass, which will be really exciting.
Wonderful. And most of these bands, are all these bands local, or
that's our aim, is to bring local artists to the forefront. So this past season we had Patty Castillo Davis played a concert, Gravel and Grace, Spencer Biggs. So the usual roster of local artists, and hopefully finding more. Tay Noel, and that's sort of where I'm expanding as well, getting to know that music community. Because it's not my forte, but I'm excited to sort of dive in and make connections with all of those people in town.
Yeah. Were you going to speak to any of the other resident or produced? What would I say? Your job? I mean, don't.
No, not too much. The resident companies at the Gallo technically fall under my umbrella, but they are all, so.
Okay.
They're all self-managed, self-produced.
Thinking more of the ones that are true resident companies, like the Yes Company.
Oh, well, so Yes Company, that fully falls under the arts education department. So Courtney Hurst is the director of arts education. So that's still her baby. And as my position's new, there probably will be some collaboration in the future in terms of the actual production itself, but we're not there yet. We'll see what happens next summer.
Okay.
I'm there to help as much as possible, but they've been running that program for a number of years successfully, so I'm not here to change it at all.
So it would be the same comments about Sankofa Theater
Yeah,
Company?
Sankofa, Sankofa is, I'm tasked in my role as their official liaison to the Gallo Center, because they are their own fully produced theater company, and generally the shows that they do at the Gallo Center are done in partnership with the Gallo Center, which means we sort of help fund the show itself in terms of we don't necessarily charge a rental fee to use the space, and we sort of split the proceeds and help market the show, and really it works as a true partnership. But they program it, they are the creative team for it, they make the show, we're just there to help facilitate and make it a success.
Okay.
And this year they have a show coming up in March as well. They're doing a 10th anniversary production of The Piano Lesson, which was their first show, which will be a wonderful production. I'm really excited about it. I think I don't know for sure yet if she's signed on, but they're bringing in a really excellent director from San Francisco to work on the show. So it should be really fun.
Wonderful. I look forward to it.
Yeah.
Okay. So where are you going to take us next here?
Yeah, let's jump to my other hat. So that's my new job. But for the past 3 years, I've also been working as a founding board member of the Modesto Children's Museum. And so if you're not familiar with the Children's Museum yet, we are in the midst of our public capital campaign to get the museum open, hopefully by the middle of next year. We founded the museum in the middle of 2019, and we're working since then to sort of figure out where to put it. And then the pandemic hit, and this building became available. So the museum will be at 930 11th Street, just around the corner from the Gallo Center. And this building, it used to be the Fat Cat Performing Arts venue, and more recently it was the Heart and Soul Coffee Shop by the House Church. So we bought it from them in late 2020 and have been working on designs to get it turned into a children's museum, which is really exciting because it's funny. The funniest thing about it that it used to be the Fat Cat, a lot of people, when they find that out, make the joke that, they were able to go see a lot of shows there, whether they went and saw Maroon 5 or Snoop Dogg when he played there. And they were like, oh yeah, I partied pretty hard at the Fat Cat. And now they're going to bring their kids to play in the Children's Museum. So it's pretty funny. So I'm actually going to show a little video that I produced. I made a bunch of these board member interviews, just talking about the museum. So rather than talk about the stuff myself, I'll play this little video so we can watch it. Can you hear it okay? My name is Ryan Holt, and I am the board vice president of the Modesto Children's Museum, and I am also the chair of the exhibit design team, leading the designers to create the experience within the museum. So a children's museum is unlike a regular museum, where a regular museum is you're often looking at an exhibit behind glass or behind a stanchion. It's a very hands-off experience. A children's museum is a hands-on interactive experience for kids where they get to learn through touch and learn through play, often without even realizing that they're learning at all. And that kind of experience is so crucial for early childhood development, where a kid can experience something at their young age when their brain is developing, and it does wonders for their education and growth over time. You have to start young to be able to instill that idea of lifelong learning. We all have that one thing when we're kids that you experience something and it suddenly alters the direction of your life, where you get to go to a museum and find something out about science or math or art, and you see that thing and you experience it, and suddenly that becomes a part of your core. And we want that for all of our children, so they can become the next great scientist or mathematician or artist in the world, all because of something they experienced when they were young at the Modesto Children's Museum. I'm not from Modesto. I grew up in Colorado and have lived in New York and Los Angeles and all over the country. And I settled here because my wife is from here, and we decided to raise our family in Modesto. And we've decided to make Modesto our home. And we really wanted to give back to our community. And your own community is what you make it. You can find amazing things to do in your community if you look. And we wanted to bring something to Modesto that we've never had before, and something that will bring in people from all over. Instead of going to the coast cities or somewhere else for an experience like this, people will come to Modesto and spend the night here and visit our restaurants, and especially come to the Children's Museum, have a good time while learning. I have 2 young children, and I'm thrilled that they're going to be able to experience the Modesto Children's Museum and play here. But we're not doing this for our own kids. We're doing this for every child in California's Central Valley. We are building something that's going to be here for generations. I can't wait for 30 years from now to come back here as a grandparent and take my grandkids to this museum. And that's what we're creating. And we need your help to get there. So there's my little pitch video. So yeah, so to follow up with that, you know, the museum, we've already raised almost $8 million, or I think we're over $8 million now. We've got this lovely thermometer on the website for our public campaign. We're aiming to raise $1.5 million from the community. And as of this week, we are at $823,628. So, you know, just we're more than halfway there. And our goal is to kind of close it out by the end of the year, is our aspiring goal to do that. So if you're interested in giving, please visit our website. It's modestochildrensmuseum.org. And I'll give a special treat to all of us here. I'm going to walk us through the exhibits in the museum. So I was on the board.
A little bit more about where this idea came from. I mean, this is a big idea. This is
yeah, it is a big idea. You know, so it came from our other founding board member. The founding board was made up of 3 families. So it's myself and my wife, Jenna and Ryan Brady, and Katie and Jake Barber. And really, this is the brainchild of Katie Barber. She's also a Modesto transplant. She grew up in Pittsburgh and moved here because of her family. Jake Barber, he's from Oakdale originally, and he is an oral surgeon here with Greater Modesto Oral Surgery. And she's sort of always had this idea that Modesto could really use something like this. And we all sort of felt that way as we were raising our young kids, that it was crazy that there was not an amenity like this here for our families and our community to use. And so we sort of dove in, and just she had the brainchild. She asked us if we wanted to get involved, and we went for it.
It's a worthy idea. I can't wait for it to open and see. You know, it's a big idea. Yeah,
and it's incredibly exciting because we're not, you know, we have the children's museums that are nearby to us. You know, Stockton has a children's museum that opened in the 90s, and it's a very wonderful organization. And but we wanted to make something here that kids could go to without having to drive that 45 minutes or an hour to Stockton, or especially drive the long way to the Bay Area Discovery Museum in San Francisco or Sacramento. And we want to be, we especially were really important to us to create an experience that was a top level experience, that you were going to get a children's museum experience in Mexico that rivals what you would get in any major city in America. And that has been our goal from the beginning. And I'm proud to say that we have created something that I think really does achieve that goal. So I'm a founding board member, but I'm also the vice president of the current board. And I also have been leading the exhibit design committee. So I've been working with an external design firm called Gyroscope that's based in Oakland to design the exhibits that are going in the museum. And we're also working with a couple of fabricators. One is called Cubic Maltby, and they're based in Mount Laurel, New Jersey, just out of Philadelphia, and another called Boss Display, which is based in Columbus, Ohio. Those two companies are actually making the exhibits for us right now. They're currently in fabrication. So I'm going to give you a bonus treat and take you through what the exhibits are going to be in the museum. We've got the Color Story train, which is a train car that has different windows of activity on the side. And also when you go inside, you can see how those interact. There's a giant color mixing wheel. There's a giant pin board over here. And on the inside wall here, you get a bunch of sort of like travel routes with little viewports. And when you look in these viewports, you can see different pictures of stuff throughout the world. Whoa, my computer jumped. And then at the front, you've got a bubble train engine and a like pixelated color adventure here through these windows. We have kept the proscenium, the stage. So this used to be the stage that was in the Fat Cat. We've shrunk it down a little bit, but this will be our little stage area where we'll be able to have ongoing daily activities, but also bring in guest performers for storytime, art, and theater inside the museum. And this will be a projection screen on the background that will be able to show fun stuff as well. This area of the museum actually will be able to be changed out every year or so, and it's based around color. So the one we're launching with is the color yellow, all about pollination. So it has sort of the experience of being a bumblebee and traveling pollen around through an almond orchard, and how they take that pollen back to their beehive and work it through and turn it into honey, and see what the eyeballs of a bumblebee are like. And let's see, what else? We also have a really exciting light lab where you get to play with light and magnets and projections and make interesting shapes and colors, all based around light. And this room will have an infinity mirror so you can see millions of versions of yourself. There's the entrance on the outside so you can see what it's like going inside. We'll have a water lab area. So this is our water lab, and this will be a full wall-sized waterfall. Put your hands up on the glass and feel the water going over your hands. And we have a long water table with 4 different water experiences in it, with pumps to take water up to the top of this structure, sort of a fog area, irrigation, and Lego area. And then this experience done at the end is called the Bernoulli principle, where it'll shoot these balls up on jets of water, and of course a whirlpool down at the very end. And the exhibits all talk about water conservation and climate change and all that additional learning that can be placed on top of these hands-on interactive experiences. So then in the middle of all of that, we have our giant climbing structure, which we're calling our Rainbow Vortex Climber, where kids can climb up in various pathways up to the very top of the building and then slide down a giant spiral slide along the outside. Upstairs, we've got an air lab with different air experiences of an air column tunnel, sort of that scarf and pipe experience that you've seen in a lot of children's museums. And down here, we have sort of another Bernoulli principle experiment where you can make these balls float on a jet of air and travel it through this sort of obstacle course upstairs. There's another view of the climbing structure. And additionally, upstairs, we've got a maker lab, which will be a place where we can have art and science experiments, and also a place to host birthday parties. Lots of fun making can be going on in there, as well as where we can host our cool field trips every day. And lastly, we have, our grocery store exhibit, which is a favorite of many children. So we actually had Save Mart and the Piccaninny Pesco Foundation come in and sponsor this area, where we'll have a full Save Mart grocery store experience where kids can actually check out their groceries, shop for juice, and even in the back have a cafe and cooking experience as well. And then lastly, we have our Little Rainbows area for kids that are under 3, which is sort of a soft play version of everything else you've seen in the museum, with climbing areas, color building, projections, and just a fun place for little kids to explore and learn through play. So yeah, that's the overview of the exhibits in the museum, which we cannot wait to open and see kids using them soon. So yeah, that's the museum.
I think the whole community is waiting for this to open. It sounds wonderful.
Yeah, I cannot wait.
So what age children?
Really, it's aiming for kids 10 and under is the age range. And so here's a rendering of what the front of the museum is going to look like. And for perspective, so this right over here is the Food Fix Butcher and Baker. So you'll be able to come have lunch at Food Fix and come to the museum and have a good time. So yeah, please support. If you want to see this museum get open, come help us out. We accept help in all ways: volunteers, financial, or just getting the word out.
And the hoped for opening date is sometime in middle of next year?
That's the goal, yeah. And we are on schedule. We are going to get there.
It's yeah, and you said the exhibits are being built now. Is that correct?
Yeah, they are. I'm actually headed out to see them in fabrication next month. I'm going to go spend a day in Philadelphia and see how they're coming along. It's pretty exciting.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the museum. And I'll touch on one last part of my life, my sort of the third hat that I wear. I mentioned that I have my own web design firm. So for the past 15 years, I've been designing websites, and it's been really exciting to be able to have a large number of clients still in the New York creative industry. But since I moved to Modesto, also be able to do a lot of work here locally. So my partner and I have been able to design the websites for Community Hospice, the MJC Foundation, the Stanislaus Community Foundation, the Cradle to Career Partnership, and numerous other small businesses here locally. And I want to show off one that I'm really especially proud of is the website for the State Theater downtown, another lovely arts organization that we love to support. And so we built this site a couple of years ago, or I guess it was only a year ago, but if you haven't used it, it makes it really easy to go see all of the movies that are coming up at the State Theater. You can see the full list of all the events that are coming up and make it really easy to go through and buy your tickets. So that's sort of my shout out to support the state and use this website and go support film and art here locally, and yeah, and then one of the other things I like to touch on before we go is some of the work that I've been able to do with regards to equity and diversity in both the theater industry around the country. So I was lucky enough to work with a client of ours named Georgia Stitt, who is a composer in New York. And she was working a few years ago to find ways to make women in the musical theater industry in New York more visible and more available for hiring. And she had worked with us previously. We were her web designer for her personal website as a composer, and she reached out to us. And so we were thrilled to be able to work with her on this not-for-profit that she formed called Maestra, which is essentially a database of women and non-binary artists who make music in the musical theater industry. And so this full directory is a way for the theater industry, if you're looking for a more diverse team for the shows that you're trying to do, you can come to this directory and search for women who are able to do the work. So you can go into these programs, and find who you want to work with, and it'll come up. So like, for example, it'll take you to the profile of Georgia Stitt and gives her bio, some music from her, and then shows her experience, and then gives a way to contact her to work with her. And it really just brings more exposure to underrepresented portions of the musical theater industry in New York. And yeah, so that's been really exciting to work on. And we've actually been able to expand it as well. So after that launched about a year later, another organization reached out to build a similar database for people of color. So we were able to sort of duplicate the functionality for this not-for-profit that was formed called Muse, which was a partnership between a bunch of organizations in New York to make another directory that's a similar setup for all people of color, essentially, working in the musical theater industry as a musician, whether that's composer or a pit musician or anything related to arranging or orchestrating. So it's been a big part of our work, and it's a really thrilling part of our work to be able to do some of that
Right.
for the industry.
Wow, I'm impressed. Are you the Energizer Bunny in disguise or something?
I don't know how I'm doing it. I'm still going. So
right.
And actually, right now too, I'm consulting with this not-for-profit, which is called Get to Work, and it actually just received a huge grant from the Miranda Foundation, which is Lin-Manuel Miranda's foundation, and his father, Luis Miranda, and it's being tasked with creating a database for all of the behind-the-scenes work in the theater industry to give more accessibility to underrepresented communities. So whether that is people of color or women or LGBT communities, it basically gives an opportunity for all of those people who have a hard time getting in the door, whether the industry has been dominated by a certain demographic. It allows for more exposure to people who do not have that exposure, to hopefully get them the jobs and make the theatrical industry a more diverse and representative workforce moving forward. So that's sort of like a passion of mine that I'm really excited to be working on right now. And I hope to bring that same sort of ideals and accessibility to everything here in Modesto, as well as I am digitally in New York.
Wow. So, all right. In the few minutes we have left here.
Yeah.
What are you going to bring to the Arts Council of Stanislaus County?
Yeah, I have lots of ideas.
Yeah, it's yeah.
You know, I look at the Arts Council. You know, I'm really excited to join the Arts Council and sort of be a part of its, you know, formative years, because it is sort of in its early stages of really figuring out what it wants to be and what it wants to do in the large grand scheme of things. So I'm excited to be a part of that, and you know, it's exactly the same stuff. You know, I want to do the stuff that I'm doing everywhere here locally, like especially when it comes to the ideals that I've already spoken to, which is one, paying artists. One thing, you need funding to be able to make art as a living, and artists deserve a living wage for the work that they do. And two, equity and access, where the public needs access to the arts, and we as a community need to fund that access somehow, so we can get people in the door, whether that is in a gallery, whether that is at a show, or whether that is just listening to music or exposing it through our educational avenues. And so those are the two biggest portions of it for me, and just exploring how we can do that locally, and what tools we have at our disposal, and what partnerships we can create to find the funding and get art in the hands of the people who need it, and get money in the hands of the artists who need to make the art.
Right. Well, and as you're aware, you know, the Arts Council was just partnered up with two other counties to bring a large sum of money into the area to pay artists.
Yes.
With the California Creative Corps, it's going to bring, what is it, $4.2 million into this central area, with 60% of it designated to pay artists, which is, yeah.
It's incredible and really exciting. You know, I feel like there's always been a challenge in getting the funding from the top levels down to where it needs to go. It always gets caught up in bureaucracy along the way, and always ends up going to places that need it and use it, but it sometimes doesn't filter down to who really needs it and really can use it. And I think a lot of what specifically state government is doing is forcing a lot of that infrastructure in place right now so that we at the local level have the ability to get the funds where it needs to go. And it's incredibly exciting that that money is going to come in and we'll be able to do great things with it.
Right, right. Yeah, my first thought when I heard of it coming in is I said, oh, we're going to challenge the stereotype of the starving artist. If you're an artist in any form,
artists who are well fed make better art, I would say.
Of course. Well, so there are some people who think that if they're starving, they'll try harder. But
I can't wait to put that misnomer to bed.
Well, glad to have you on board, and so glad to have you in the community. Sounds like you're involved in a bunch of very worthwhile projects that are just going to improve.
Yeah, and to anyone who's watching, come see a show at the Gallo Center. Come find me, see me when you're there. We'd love to chat with you, and we'll see you at the Children's Museum next year.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, thanks for being with us, and we'll say goodbye for now.
All right, thanks, David.
Okay, thanks for joining us.